I would say in the 4 years and the literally tens of thousands of books that we've sold on our website, I can count on two hands how many returns we've had. People just don't like return books on or from our website. I know on Amazon, that's a different story, but it just isn't something that happens. People I think they know our offering, they want it. They're likely not going to return it.
Welcome to My Contributive Verse. I'm Brenna Jeanneret, children's book author of the upcoming nonfiction picture book, A Bike is Not Just a Bike, about how the bicycle helped to usher in the women's revolution, illustrated by Michelle Pierre, launching July 21st, 2026, and now available for pre-order. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Munkin, dad, kidlit author, and science communicator. This episode is proudly sponsored by Canadian children's book publisher Tealmore Press, where every book sold supports reforestation. Check out Tealmore's newest release, Enough to Share, written by Mary Helen Berg and illustrated by Sue Todd. It's a warmly illustrated book about our beautiful and fragile planet, with themes of sharing and the importance of coexistence. Check out this title and the full Tealmore catalog at tealmorepress.com, including titles like Naked, Fungi Are More Than Mushrooms, and Supermoon. So today we have a very special guest, the founder and editor from Gloo Books, who helped to bring my debut nonfiction, A Bike is Not Just a Bike, into the world. Karen Chan is here with us to talk all things behind the scenes of an indie book publisher. And we talk about Gloo Books' mission of inclusivity, diversity, and equality. Karen tells us how she ended up founding an indie book company after leaving her job as a lawyer. And of course, we talk all about how bikes came to be. A quick note that in the episode, I say the book is publishing in March, but the official publishing date is now July 21st. The book is available for pre-order now from your favorite indie bookstore, or you can request it from your library. Thank you so much to everyone who has supported this book so far, and thank you for listening. Here's Karen's verse. First of all, thanks for joining us, Karen. This is exciting because we talk to all kinds of kidlit people on the podcast, but it's nice when editors and publishers are willing to come on and just chat a little bit more about what actually happens on that side of things, because as authors, we're very much on this side. We know a lot about this side, but the actual business of it is sort of ooh, what's happening over there? So people love to hear from editors.
Are working together on the current book is
yes.
You're right at the top of the Gloo Books website, Brenna. Yeah. On top of the authors page. Yeah.
I know, which is very exciting. Yeah, so I think, and this will be great to chat about too, because, talking, an author talking to their editor, I think is also a conversation that people aren't generally, it's not something that's recorded or that people know about, or what to ask, or how does that work, or, what are you working on, or anyway. So I think it'll be great too, for just so people can know about the book coming out. So we'll make sure to publish the podcast, sort of in conjunction with leading up to the launch. I think it'll be really good. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know where to start. I guess Gloo Books. How did Gloo Books start? Let's start there.
What were you thinking?
I knew what I was thinking. I feel like if I knew what I know now, I don't know if I would do it, to be totally honest.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I think most people say that about starting a business. So, it's you're man, if I only knew how hard this was going to be. I don't even know if I
tried it, and I'm no longer self-employed. It was a long time ago.
It's, but what caused me to enter this delusional fever dream-like state thinking, I could do this. Well, I have no background in publishing, so that's the first thing is I love books. I've always loved children's books ever since I was little. It's always been a dream of mine to write a kid's book, I think a lot of people. And I am a corporate lawyer by training, so was practicing law in my 6th year at my, so big law, so mergers and acquisitions, very boring writing, very different kind of writing. Did a lot of writing, but not the fun kind of writing. And I had kids is essentially the short answer. I had my first son and we started reading a lot. My oldest son really loves books, just has always been, still is the little boy in the corner just reading books voraciously. And at a very little age, we would just constantly be reading books. And I noticed, I was wow, it's really hard to find children's books with Asian American boy characters, not even as a side character, but as a main character. And I thought, growing up in the US, I'm Asian American, and I just know the importance of representation and how much that can do for kids, sense of belonging and confidence in the world. And so I started searching out more diverse books for him, and then also being able to see how other people who don't look like him experience the world, and their their viewpoint was really important for me to diversify his bookshelf. So I just started on this journey of diversifying his bookshelf, and that's sort of how this whole thing began of, wow, there needs to be more books like this out there, or why is it so hard to find these kind of books? And it started with a book that I wrote. And as I went through that whole process and talking to people and like, how do I get this thing published? The same journey that I think a lot of authors go on, talking to agents and editors, I was like, wow, this industry is really, really traditional and gatekept and opaque and tough. Like, it's just dominated by these, few publishers that really it seems like holds the keys for authors to be able to get their stories told and published. And then on the other end of that is self-publishing, which has its own challenges. I thought, if I'm going to do this, and I'm already setting up a lot of the work and doing a lot of the legwork to do it for myself, I should do this for other people who also have really important stories to tell, but might not have the pathways to get their stories out there. So that's why I started Gloo Books.
That's a big leap from like, I'm going to do this for myself and I'm going to go down the path of trying to get published, to doing this for other people and starting a publishing house. And there are degrees of assistance between, using your sort of professional corporate background to help people navigate the industry, consulting, editing, those sorts of things. So what was the tipping point for you where you said, I'm going to lean into this all the way and be the publisher?
I think when I saw how hard it was, I'm a pretty well-resourced person in the sense that at the time I was making a really good income. Like, it wasn't a money thing for me. And I think for so many writers, it is, they want that to be their career. And if it was that hard for me, I can't imagine how difficult it is for someone who's just starting out and, might have to also balance like a full-time job and trying to be an author. That, I think it just, I don't know if it really came to a culmination or anything. It was just sort of this idea that if I'm going to do it for me, I don't want just my stories out there. There's so many amazing storytellers and amazing writers. Obviously, Brenna, like, we're publishing your book. So I thought, gosh, like, there has to be an opportunity here that I think some publishers might not be seeing, but also our viewpoint. So my viewpoint, obviously, as Gloo Books, and our perspective on what kids' content can look like. This should be out there. So that was a leap.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been, so Karen, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it hasn't been that long. How long? Like 5-6 years?
21.
Okay, so yeah, 4 years. But I remember seeing in Publishers Weekly, the announcement for the Fib, which that cover is amazing. The story sounded incredible. And then I went to your website because I had never heard of Gloo Books before. So I went to the website and just looking at, I don't know if it was like, the homepage or the about page or whatever, but there was sort of a line in there that was like, this is what we stand for, like equality and diversity and, equal rights and all of the things like that. Immediately, like just that, like couple of sentences or that line or whatever that was, I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. This is amazing, because this is exactly what my book, anyways, a bike is not just a bike.
Yeah.
Sort of encapsulated, like, these women who worked so hard to fight for just the freedom to ride a bike. Mm-hmm. And then, now it's the future and things have just really like snowballed, and there's all these amazing women like breaking all these ceilings and, all of that. But it it really solidified for me, like, what you guys stand for and your intentionality behind, what you're doing and the books that you choose. Which, all that to say, like, I feel like you're already making a huge impact in just like such a short amount of time. So anyways, yeah, I'm like, I'm very proud and happy to be a part of the Gloo Books family. So,
I mean, we're so like, yeah, anyways, I could go on and on about how good it is, but clearly we're publishing it, so we think it's really great.
Sometimes I feel compelled. Yeah. Add like vocal art notes, and this last exchange, Karen, you were like just tiny clapping with delight. I feel like that's important just to make sure people understand.
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I interrupted the moment of joy, but I'm curious, where did you start? Did you start with your own stuff?
Yeah, so I started with my own book, and that was the first book that I guess Gloo Books published. But really, it was sort of a self-publishing endeavor that quickly turned into obviously a publishing company. And so at that time, it just seemed the right way to go for me. And I explored different options and like submitting it, getting an agent, all this stuff that you would do traditionally. And to me, I just really wanted to get the book out there because the whole point was like I couldn't find a book that featured an Asian American, boy protagonist. So why would I wait years to kind of get the green light to do that? That ended up, we started initially mostly as a direct to consumer business. So as you know, in publishing, really, if you want to get your book out to mass market retailers, bookstores, libraries, schools, it's a big jumbled mess of different wholesalers and distributors that you have to be sort of in with. And really, unless you're publishing a huge amount of a pretty big quantity of books and your seasonal list is pretty large, I don't think they'll give you the time of day, right? They're on a really mass scale. So we thought, gosh, we know there's consumers out there that want this book. If I exist and I'm saying I can't find any, there have to be other people like me saying the same thing. And so why don't we actually just go directly to the customer? Because that's who we would end up at anyway, without needing the approval or having to convince certain people that, hey, can you stock our book? Can you distribute our book for us? They take a huge cut. We're starting off really small. So I thought, why don't we just do this as a direct to consumer business? And, that's the beauty of technology nowadays. It's like anyone can sort of start a business. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy or successful, but the tools are there. The internet has sort of democratized entrepreneurship in many ways. So you can start an e-commerce store on, Shopify or Wix or, any of those platforms pretty easily. And you don't need to have some technical background to do that. So that's there. And then the marketing piece is social media, right? Like social media has sort of been really, really huge. And I don't think a lot of publishers are even leveraging social media to the extent that they can be. Online advertising, social media advertising, Google ads, stuff like that. So there were so many tools that are readily available to people. And certainly I'm not saying it's easy. It takes a huge amount of work to know how to leverage those efficiently without breaking the bank. And so obviously it's still business like anything else. You have to have a business plan and know kind of your expenses and your income and all that stuff. And so that's how it all started. And then once we did that, I think because we were selling directly to customers, which went really well at the beginning, we just sort of, it was me at the beginning, just sort of kept going with whatever came in through the door. So our next books, for example, we just quickly hit the ground running with the Variation Guide to Korean Food, which was written by Michelle Lee, who lives in St. Louis, actually. She's the news anchor in St. Louis.
No way. Oh, that's awesome.
I think you've seen her on the news.
Yeah, I'm sure I have.
She's on the morning news. So that was her book that we first did. And then slowly we sort of got the attention of stores, the trade, schools, definitely libraries. So lots of requests from libraries being like, how can I get your books? And we weren't distributed or available on the wholesale platforms that they usually order from, which is, Baker and Taylor, Ingram, Follett, all those channels. So we were basically doing our own distribution. So I would say we were self-distributed for a while. And eventually we actually created wholesale accounts. This is getting really into the weeds of the business, but I feel
but it's interesting.
A lot of people don't know this stuff. So
Exactly.
No, it's great. Yeah.
So we started wholesale accounts with Ingram and Baker and Taylor, Follett, all those places. So for those who don't know, most bookstores will order through Ingram as the wholesaler. It's probably one of the biggest wholesalers. And then schools and libraries, usually a combination of Brodart, Baker and Taylor, also Ingram. And those are the channels through which most retailers, most libraries, most schools will order books. And it makes sense, especially with even schools and libraries. They're usually government entities. They're not wanting to deal with a whole bunch of vendors. Same with bookstores. So we got onto all those platforms and we were self-distributed for, I would say, a little over like a year or so through those channels. And that presented a whole number of administrative tasks like invoices and fulfillment and all this stuff, which we were already doing for our e-commerce side. So our direct to consumer business, we were already doing that. And it just got to be a lot. And we just felt like there were also more retailers and libraries that we wanted to reach that we couldn't just sort of on our own. We don't have a whole sales team, it's pretty much me and like 3 other people and on a part-time basis. So it's not that we had we just felt like capacity wise, this was a little too much for us. So then that's when we signed with our distributor, Baker and Taylor Publisher Services, which is a distributor underneath Baker and Taylor, which is a huge wholesaler. So that's a little in the weeds, but
no, that's okay. And that, I know that's a recent thing because that's what you and I had talked about when we first were chatting about the book and just sort of like avenues for like, what was happening and how, publishing was or how distribution was gonna work. So that, I mean, that's really exciting because that's relatively new. So how is that going? I mean, it must have taken a lot off your plate, number one, and hopefully number two, it's working in a way that's successful, that you feel like, oh, this was a good move.
Yeah, I think it's good so far. I think we are still, these things, I think, take a long time to sort of gain traction. So even though we've been around for 4 years, in many ways, it feels like I'm starting a new business. And we started with them at the beginning of this year. And that's because we really had no brand awareness within the industry. We've always operated outside of the industry, even though we've done really well for ourselves outside of the industry. There was a lot more potential for growth within the trade by joining a distributor, but sales reps didn't know about us, and major other indie bookstores sort of outside of California and Los Angeles didn't know about us. Or we sold to other states too, but kind of your bread and butter bookstores and the Amazon reps and Barnes & Noble reps didn't know about, we're such a tiny press. And so starting this year, it felt like we really had to jump through all the hoops that a publisher has to jump through in order to gain visibility, because there are so many publishers out there, indie publishers especially. And not only that, you're competing with the big 5 publishers as well, which that's a whole nother thing because they have very, very extensive budgets for marketing and PR. So we all have to play that game and we all have to jump through those hoops and check off all those boxes that you have to do as a publisher in order to kind of gain the attention of those people who stand between you and the reader. So that has been sort of like the biggest learning curve for us is doing that on an indie publisher budget.
Right.
We're doing it, and I think it's been really good. And Baker and Taylor, I think our distributor, we went with the right one. So we talked to obviously several distributors, but we wanted to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond than a small fish in a big pond, simply because already as it is, we, have a pretty specific POV in terms of our editorially, and just wanted to make sure that we had, I guess, a team that was excited about our books, number one. So we talked to distributors who definitely were like, I was like, okay, if you can't get excited about our titles, like there's no,
I'll get excited about invoicing you or making money off your books or whatever. Yeah, but not about the mission.
Right, or just letting it push there because they have, 100 other publishers that they're servicing that, So I think we went with the right folks. Actually, just yesterday, though, it was just announced that Baker and Taylor is being sold to Readerlink.
Oh, geez.
So there might be some changes down the pipeline, but that's TBD. It might actually, who knows, when a company gets sold, all kind, different.
How this M&A stuff works, right?
Yeah.
If anybody does.
Yes, that's true. But I think it will be, the team is remaining. It's a small distribution team that they have for at Baker and Taylor, and I think that's great. That's always worked out really well for us. They were really excited about getting us on and selling our titles, and our sales reps are really excited about us. So I think all of that is, I couldn't ask for a better kind of environment to be sort of brought into.
Did you feel like it was an inevitable part of scaling your business? Or was there a version of Gloo Books that could have remained direct to consumer with a lot of extra hustle? Like it's just like a business on-off switch that you have to switch and say like, okay, well, if we want to get bigger, we're going to have to
Totally.
make this change. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's still an option. I've always, I know I have a lot of publisher friends now who have their own publishing companies, and I know a handful of them who have been with the distributor for years and are leaving. And they're like, I'm going to self-distribute. I know some publishers who say, nope, don't want to deal with that. I'm happy with my distributor. They're doing a great job. So I think there is a version of Gloo Books that could have potentially kept down that path of and to be clear, our direct consumer business, we're still retaining that. But obviously a lot of resources had to be put into entering into this distribution deal. So like I said, the hoops that you have to jump through and all the things that you got to participate in and advertise in, that all cost a lot of money. So yeah, I think there's a version of Gloo that I think could have done it independently. We just weren't resourced enough. And if we had published fewer titles, maybe, but we kind of kept going with our publication cycle and cadence at the speed that it was at. And even then, it wasn't that many books compared to some other publishers. But it was just sort of how we wanted to invest our cash and where we wanted to prioritize things. And we felt like I talked to enough people who were our publishers who had either done distribution by themselves or had a distributor, and there was no consensus. I mean, it was all over the place. It was, I'm a distributor.
Yeah.
It's awful it's okay, but I'm not super happy to I love my distributor. They're great. So the fact that there wasn't any consensus just told me that we wouldn't really know until we did it ourselves, and actually tried it. So we're trying it. How it works.
And I guess you can always sort of pull the plug,
Yes.
you could always go back to doing what you're 100%. Doing, what you know how to do. So kind of a twofold question. So you mentioned the cadence of the publishing of the books. So how many books a year do you guys aim to publish? And based on that, this probably informs that question. But I don't actually know how big your team is. I know you and Clay, and then I know, one or two editors. But then that's it. So, but I'm guessing there's maybe more. I don't know, because you guys do so much. That's such a small team to do so much, which, it's possible. But so anyways, yeah.
Yeah, so we've there've been a few people who've come and gone on our team, but so to answer your first question, anywhere from 2 to 4 titles. I think one year we did 6, which was insane. I was
a lot. Yeah.
Doing that at this, how big Gloo is right now. This was before we were with a distributor. Now that we are with a distributor, there's even more work put behind titles because you have to get them made so much further in advance. So before we would finish a book, literally the illustrator would be done with the files and we'd be like, all right, let's start selling this thing. There's no reason to wait.
Right.
If you're distributed by a distributor, you got to go on their season and their cycle. And there's the fall, winter, and the title has to be entered into the metadata. So the sales reps have them and all the different, online retailers have them and the buyers can see them 6-7 months in advance. And then you got to submit for reviews 6 months in advance and they need a copy of it. There's all these things where the book has to get done so far in advance. And we didn't have that issue before because we were just selling online. So now that we have that, our production and our budget is very different. So like I said, it's almost kind of like a completely different business, to be honest, that we started. And yes, it is me and my husband, Clay, who started this year, but he really heads PR and marketing. Before it was a gal named Olivia, who was amazing. And she's fantastic. She used to be a Chronicle and is now at Libro FM. And our editorial director, Alex, and then we work with some freelance editors, just depending on what the topic of the book is. So we're not always using the same editors. It really just depends on the genre, whatever. And then we did have someone who was with us from Candlewick, who's amazing, Jane Dan. She's awesome. Love her, but we couldn't keep her on full time. So she had to go. She went with another publisher, but she is consulting with us on a very limited basis.
Yeah, wow. It's interesting because so we chatted in February. Mm-hmm. So for the listening audience, we are recording this early September. My book has been edited, fact-checked, illustrated fully. We have pull quotes. We are about to submit. Clay just sent me the press release and he's about to submit, like you're saying, all of the publicity and all of the stuff and whatever, and it publishes in March. So just to put that into perspective, though, that is like lightning fast for traditional publishing, right? Like this is like, wow, like we were like, okay, we're going to do this. Let's do this. We're going back to back to back. I remember getting an email from you and you were like, hey, if you could get me these edits by tonight, that would be great. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, Jean, can you watch, our kids so that I can just like, I'm like, I need like, whatever, an hour. Anyway, so it's like, yeah, it's like boom, 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 boom. But you're saying when you guys were self-distributing, like it could have even been faster. Like,
I consider this long, but for the industry, it's not.
Yeah. Which is this, I mean, it's so interesting because picture books, across the board, like we talk about this all the time in the sort of kidlit community. It's like you wait and wait and wait and wait just to like work really fast to wait some more, like hurry up and like wait some more. Yeah. So it's like, this particular schedule is like crazy fast, but now it's nice to have an insight into like why things are so slow. It's not necessarily, the illustrations, which a lot of us, those do take a lot of time. Yes. But a lot of us are like, oh, I get it. Like illustrations take time and the layout and all of the things. And so people think that's most of the hang up, but it's interesting to have the insight that it's like, no, actually, like if you're with a distributor, you're trying to build this sort of like buzz and this like marketing platform so that when the book finally gets here, you have all these people who are like, yes, I want to buy it. So you're building this like customer base before you even drop the book, which is like, yeah, it's wow. It's a lot of like stuff behind the scenes.
Pre-selling. So the industry has a lot of pre-orders and pre-selling, and some of that is just, I think that's just the way it is. And then others is like when I talk about these things that you just have to do in order to get noticed, these hoops I keep calling hoops you have to jump through. For example, for certain libraries, they will not purchase your book for their collection if it's not reviewed by a trade, like a recognized trade publication.
Interesting.
So in order to do that, we have to submit your book for review, but their timeline for that is that you have to submit it. Most of them require you to submit it like 5 to 6 months before the publication date. So that means, like you said, illustrations take a long time, but you have to back out even further from that because the whole book has to be finished. So that means we have to have a finished book by then. And then on top of that, like you said, our distributor now that we're with one, they have a deadline, an internal deadline. So your book is coming out spring, summer of 2026. That deadline was July something that we had to have the book completely done by.
It's time for this week's book reviews. Josh's review for this week is for My Subway Runs by James Gladstone and Pierre Pratt. The remarkable thing about this book is that it relates so effectively the lived experience of going on an errand with a parent. As a kid, you're dragged along and have very little agency. And while it's great to have books that center kid agency, it's also good to depict this part of life. Sometimes you schlep along with mom so she can look for a job, and what you see becomes your education, and how you travel to get there is your lifeline that makes it possible. The book captures that childlike inner narrative perfectly. And my review for this week is for friend of the pod, Nathan Christopher, and the next book in his series, When the Witch Wrote Back, illustrated by Pablo Pino. If you haven't already, take a listen to Nathan's episode where we chat all about When They Wrote Back series and how it came to be. This follow-up to When Santa Wrote Back is just as fun, creative, and kid-friendly. This time, Jake moves next door to a witch, though she insists she's not a witch and writes her letters hoping that she'll share some of her magic with him in order to get ready for its Halloween party. But could it be that doing the hard work instead of taking a magical shortcut is the way to go? Nah. Make sure to get yours today. And don't forget to get your own reviews and library requests in. It's the #1 way to help an author's sales. And now, back to our show.
Wow. Completed all the metadata. Metadata is a whole nother conversation, but metadata is essentially the information of your book that gets like broadcast and sent through the Onyx feed to all booksellers, book buyers, everything. And
this is how, sorry, to be clear, just to pull this apart, that metadata and all that information is how, for example, like I would get a recommendation on my library site or on bookshop.org or something where it would say like, you might like this. You might like Bike is Not a Bike if you like some other book. It's like information associated with the book.
Yes. So like the book description about the authors, about you guys, the ISBN number, the age range, the page number, images of I mean, we're talking about kids' books here, and really you do have to have images for kids' books. Like you can get away without with adult books without it. A cover, things like that. And so for a customer, an end reader, if you're just your average reader, this doesn't really apply to you. So it's really for booksellers and book buyers and our sales reps who are in the field selling accounts, that they need this info. And so if you can imagine, they're dealing with dozens and dozens of publishers, hundreds of titles. So all of that information is stuff that they go based off of. So that's just an example of how, to elaborate even further on this whole idea that your book has to be done so far in advance. And that's really to give the publisher all that leg and the distributor all that runway in order to be able to promote your book heavily before it comes out. So we also have sales conferences. So we have our fall sales conference in which we are going to be talking about your book. And really, we're going to be in front of all our sales reps across the country and in Canada saying, this is why it's so freaking amazing. So it's like this game of telephone, and you just have to be able to communicate that through all these different gatekeepers. So it's the distributor, then to the sales reps, and the sales reps to the buyers, and the buyers then to, the people who work at the bookstore who are literally hand selling your book to a reader. And there's so many books coming out constantly. So it's how can you rise above a lot of the noise, a lot of the stuff that's coming out, and things like awards, things like PR, things like reviews really help with that. Obviously, organic social media, if you have a presence as an author yourself and you're active on a platform, whether it's social media or your newsletter or whatever it is. And I think that's why so many publishers nowadays are turning to their authors to be able to promote their books too, because that means your book will sell through. So it's one thing to get your book sold into retail spaces and bookstores and whatnot. And that's great because you're like, okay, I've sold this book. But if no one's going to buy it off the shelf, that's a huge problem for the distributor and the publisher, because I don't know a single industry that does this except publishing. There could be, correct me if I'm wrong, but in publishing, the publisher has to take returns for wholesale, books that were sold to retailers, which is just crazy to me. Like just real talk. Like I'm not, in publishing, so maybe people in publishing go, oh, this is how it has to happen. That is insane to me. Like I just cannot believe that, 6 months later, I'll get a return of dozens and dozens of books. Half of them have been, flipped through and on the shelf and off the shelf, and we can't even.
And they're unsellable. Yeah.
Unsellable. Unfortunately, a lot of them are unsellable. So we actually had a whole inventory sale where we did a flash sale because I was like, I'm not going to pulp these. A lot of publishers pulp them, which is really sad. Yeah. We just sold them at a discount and took that money and donated it, So, and we could do that because we have a pretty robust e-commerce site. But yeah, that's a lot of waste, And so I think that's the plus side to having, for a publisher, if you're an author, to having an audience or a following, even if it's a small one, and will go out and buy your book because they love you as an author or your books that you write. That's what we call sell-through. It's like the book goes out, it gets sold through all these channels, but it actually gets purchased by somebody.
Yeah, right.
That's another really big plus side to our direct-to-consumer business, which is why we're not letting that go. That's really an important part of our business, is that we don't deal with the same issues in terms of returns on our direct-to-consumer site. I would say in the 4 years and the literally tens of thousands of books that we've sold on our website, I can count on two hands how many returns we've had. People just don't return books from our website. I know on Amazon that's a different story, but it just isn't something that happens. People I think they know our offering, they want it, they're likely not going to return it.
Yeah,
there's that, and it's a whole hassle unless you have business machinery to enable that, or can take it back into a store. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a lot about publishing in the industry. That's what I think is how publishing is returns. So.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting, it's really interesting, pulling back the curtain to hear, how that how that happens. So I wanted to just talk about, like, I know because I was part of this process, but for people listening, so my book is nonfiction. So going through that process for me, because this is my debut nonfiction book, was a little different than going through like a straight fiction book, in that it had to be fact checked. So I worked with Alex, that was the editor who went through my stuff, who was great and very like thorough with where she was finding the facts and like cross-checking things, and she'd send me links and like other like
that just was like Tayeba,
who
did the fact checking. Yeah.
Oh shoot, why did I think it was Alex?
Because she's our editor. I'm pretty sure it was Tay that did it.
I think you might be right. It might be Tay. I thought it was Alex because I feel like I had some back and forth with her.
Yes, so you probably did.
Sorry, Tay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Anyways, I just meant to say, like, it's, yeah, like that was a really important piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I just want to say, normally, this is a credit to you, Karen and Gloo. People at that level who are part of the bookmaking process rarely get shouted out by name. Not that this is any big venue for that, but just highlighting a number of people who are part of the process of making a book come to life in a good way.
Absolutely. Yes.
Totally. Because I did my research. You know, it's not like the book wasn't researched, but Tay was very thorough about making sure that everything, you know, was clear, and, you know, there were multiple sources to back things up. Anyway, so I guess the question in there, or like the behind the scenes part, is, you know, how do you pick which editors to go with, and like how you're gonna make sure that things are fact checked? Like, what is your process? And then, like, after, you know, going forward, then like what are next steps? How does the book come to be?
Yeah, so for nonfiction, it's definitely different. We have different editors for nonfiction, and it's because we want folks who have that background of fact checking. And then there's also, for certain books that we have, like the Very Asian Guide series, which explores food and cuisine from different cultures, is a certain level of cultural competency. So we don't want anything in there that would be reading as, you know, stereotypical or offensive, and they're written and illustrated by people from that community, and that was very intentional too. But I think when you're talking about culture or ethnicity or race or anything like that, or religion, I think it's really important to have that sensitivity reader there to make sure that we're depicting and talking about this topic in sort of the most respectful way possible that is also age appropriate for kids. So that's also a different kind of lens that we look at nonfiction through. But with your nonfiction, yeah, it was like Tay has had extensive experience working for major publishers doing nonfiction and fact checking and all that. And even then, like we will still be doing. So if you saw right now, your book is as an e-arc, and it has a watermark that says this is an uncorrected proof, that's still being edited. And we went through several rounds of edits with Tay, but we'll be doing more, you know, and this is before it goes to print. So once it's to print, you're like, all right, it's out there, it's done.
Yeah.
So it's just almost an iterative process, and we want to get different eyeballs on it too. So we might hire a different editor just to kind of get someone who has a different method of fact checking and stuff. So editing is just constant. It's constant until we actually like send it to the printer, essentially.
I mean, to your point, so Josh, I don't know if I told you this, but I reached out to a bunch of people to read the book and then write blurbs for the book, including all of the women mentioned at the end of the book who have broken these ceilings and these records and won all these gold medals.
I don't think you did tell me that, but that's an amazing tactic.
Yeah, so a handful of them wrote back and were like, yeah, I'll write you a blurb, no problem. But they also wrote back and very kindly were like, oh, but actually, like, you know, the way you worded this isn't quite right. Like, it's more like this, and this, or whatever. So that was also really helpful because, you know, like it doesn't matter how well researched somebody is if their title has changed or, you know, history has moved on and things are a little bit different, or the landscape has changed, or whatever. These are nuances that don't always show up in a search. So it was helpful to have them read through and be like, oh, actually, like, yeah, the concept is correct, but like the wording is inaccurate or whatever. So stuff like that was also helpful. So Karen actually she resent me a couple of different versions of the e-arc to make sure that that stuff was reflected. So yeah, just a constant fixing.
We are coming out with a book about chocolate, about like the history and science of chocolate.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's really fun actually. So it's like an informational picture book, I would call it. And we actually worked with like 2 chocolate scholars to conceive. So normally with editing, like we will have the finished manuscript and we send it to an editor. And it's like, okay, this was like, we just wanted to make sure so much that we got it right, especially when we're talking about, for example, ancient Mesoamerica, that we are really, really being accurate and not stereotyping in any way or kind of misrepresenting history in any way in the written word or in illustration. So they were actually working on the project from the get-go, like literally from outline phase to writing it, reviewing drafts of it, reviewing the illustrations, so making sure illustrations were correct and accurate. And I think that's so cool to be a chocolate scholar. Like this is it's really
yeah.
Science.
I didn't know that existed. That's very cool.
They run a chocolate institute. One of them is at Boston University. The other one's at Harvard. Dr. Carla Martin and Jose Ganem. So they're both out in Boston, but just really cool. And they were so excited because they said, you know, so much of the work that we do is really grown-up work. We're all talking to adults here and research papers and all this stuff. And how refreshing to be able to work on a children's book about chocolate.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I bet that was really fun for them. I feel I'm just picturing both of these chocolate scholars look just like Willy Wonka. That's the only thing I can come up with in my brain.
It's they're real people. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing about this nonfiction space is that like so much about the publishing process is hard, but then you start to ask questions and you start to depict real people's experience. And it's such a universal delight to have real people doing real work being highlighted, smashing barriers and doing science and all this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually it's really cool. So Alex is actually the one, our editorial director is the one who wrote the Chocolate Unwrapped. And she was living abroad. She's from DC, from DC area, but she was living in Guinea for like 2 years or a year because her husband's in the foreign service. So they had to like relocate. And East Africa is a huge exporter of cacao in modern day. And she got to meet a chocolate maker there. So we feature her in the back matter.
Cool.
A woman chocolatier who started her own chocolate company. And so it's really cool. And then, so yeah, highlighting like real life heroes. And even in your book, right, all the athletes that have done incredible things, circumnavigated the world nonstop.
Yeah.
Like how do you even do that, you know?
Right.
Yeah, but it's very, I love nonfiction. I'm sort of, you know, I mean, they're both great in different ways, but I really have a special place in my heart for nonfiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that sense, like in the sense of, you know, what attracted you to Brenna's book originally, how do you and the team think about building your list? You've got what seems to be a super clear vision of the types of stories that you want to tell and what you want to represent in your books. But how do you create that balance? How do you decide bike time, chocolate time, fib time? Because there must be so much that comes in that is super worthy of being told.
I wish we could publish even like a quarter of the submissions that we get. It's literally of capacity and budget, but we get so many fantastic submissions. And yeah, it's a shame that we like can't move faster on them. And it's always been like, I want to publish more, but I'm like, okay, we gotta like, you know, pace ourselves here. I would say like why, I mean, Brenna, why your book in particular? I think there just has to be this immediate sort of, oh my gosh, this is really special and something that just resonates. And that's on a totally subjective and personal level, because as you know, an author can submit their manuscript to many, many publishers and not hear anything. And so it's really a matter of that acquisitions editor, whoever's kind of manning the submissions box, whether they personally resonate with it. And I don't think there's any objective, that's completely a subjective thing, I think, whether they like the work itself. Whether it's marketable is a whole nother thing, you know, and kind of how it's positioned in how we're going to market it, how are we going to position this book? Is it like anything that's come out? Is it different from something that's come out? That's a whole nother exercise. And many publishers will put together like a P&L, a profit and loss statement per book, just to see, okay, how much are we going to spend on it, on the marketing, how much do we expect to make, all this stuff. So I think every publisher has their own different approach, but at least from a artistic perspective and an editorial perspective, I think it's just purely, obviously does this align with our mission and our point of view as a publisher? That just has to be number one. And then if it passes that, is this something that we really like sparks with us, and I think both, for example, in our front list, your book and the Fib, I think both of those, between me, Alex, and Clay, like I think one of us was like messaged the other and was like, oh my god, this one's amazing, or like something, because we all have access to that inbox. I think both of those I remember there's like an instant, let's look into this more, like I like this. So
I was gonna say, because I think I got a message from you like 4 or 5 days after I had submitted. It was pretty quick, and I was like, oh, they want to talk about it. Okay, like let's talk.
Yeah, and I think it's timing too. It's like luck on timing, because it just so happened when I got your manuscript, we hadn't kind of filled in the slate for spring summer 2026, and so we're like kind of like, okay, what do we do next? And we have definitely a whole backlog of books that I want to get to, but it was sort of also like, how does it fill out the collection of books that we have? And we really haven't done anything about touch about like gender equality and women's rights, and sports was a huge thing that we've been wanting to do. Actually, like since before we got your manuscript, we're like, we want to do books about sports.
That's amazing, especially because, Josh, I'll tell you all the details after, but I was talking to Karen and Clay recently about the marketing release, and I was like, okay, so just so you know, if Bikes does well, I have another idea for a sports-related sequel that might be amazing. So that's when my face lit up when she was like, sports. I'm like, oh, yay, sports! I have all kinds of sports stories.
Oh,
anyways.
Definitely. I mean, I think like
sequel potential,
encouraging women in sports, and just even like there's so much to cover there too. I mean, sports is something,
and it's exploding. Yeah, it's like, it's everywhere.
And, I think even just like sports psychology, and like so many of our kids are playing sports, and how to kind of deal with like winning and losing, which is applicable to all aspects of life. But you start to kind of touch on these themes and that's why we love putting our kids in sports, right? Because it teaches them how to like teamwork and kind of get into that sort of game mentality of whether it's a solo sport or team sport, but the idea of sort of winning and losing and the mental space you have to be in to kind of keep going and kind of perform at your peak is so universal. And then on top of that, you add women's sports, which is, like you said, just really, really taking off. And it's such an exciting time that we were like, we gotta do sports. And so it was just sort of divine timing that your manuscript came in at that time is really
yeah.
And
just to piggyback real quick, because like the community of sports too, and then like all of the chatter now around like transgender kids specifically who are being kept out of sports for this stupid reason, like it's heartbreaking to hear about, because these kids just want to be part of the community and part of it like everybody else. Like it's not their fault that they, feel like they're not, like their body wasn't quite right for them. Like that, it's really unfortunate what's happening for trans kids specifically. And I think women's sports especially is sort of this like inclusive like community where they can go and, more and more, like we're becoming more and more aware of it. And it can be this like safe place for kids for a lot of reasons, not just transgender, but like all kinds of kids, like looking for that safe space, like maybe outside their home, or maybe from a bully, or maybe from, just, I don't know, all these things. I have a very special place in my heart for all kinds of sports, women's sports specifically. So yeah.
Totally. And like, even when we were doing the illustrations, we were really intentional about making sure it was as inclusive as possible, because that's the spirit of the book, right? We're talking about women specifically in a certain time in history when women were not allowed to do certain things, but there's clearly this ongoing theme of how can we make sports more inclusive. So we were intentional about depicting, kids who have disabilities, and what would it look like for them to ride a bike? And they're depicted in like the last couple spreads. We'll talk about modern day heroes and communities, and similarly with sort of the other nonprofit or community-based organizations that we highlight, not directly in the book, but sort of give a nod to. Like Black Girls Do Bike, and what was the other one? It was
I think it was called, it's like Angels something.
yeah.
Is a local organization to me that helps, like make custom bikes for kids with disabilities so that they can get out and ride, which is amazing. So
But actually, Michelle, the illustrator, had images from those organizations and specifically depicted like them
that's
in
very
their
cool.
like riding uniforms of the same pink, like, bike tee that they all wear. So that was, all those things were very important for us to include. And so I think it's little things like that and kind of seeing sort of broader picture that is really important when it comes to editing and art direction. And obviously we know the ethos of, and you as an author, sort of your vision and mission for this book, we wanted to make sure that it like really reflected that too.
Yeah.
In the It Takes a Village to Create a Book sense, it strikes me as true, at least in this case, and probably for a lot of the books that you published, that like, Brenna, you wrote bikes, it's been a long time since you wrote that story. I can't imagine that you imagined that this story would be doing all this inclusivity work and like adding all these extra layers to it. It might be something that you hope for, but it's not something that we should expect. It becomes added benefit just because of the care that you're putting into the process of representing something that you want to see in publishing. So it's just kudos for the intentionality there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like Karen and her team have done like an amazing job, like being really intentional about it, which is, part of why, like I said at the beginning of the episode, why I was so drawn to you guys as a publishing house to begin with. Cause I was like, oh, they really get it. Like they're really on board with like, what I'm trying to say here and why this bike or why this book is so special and why a bike is so special, because it means so much more than just being a bike, which is, that's why the title is what it is, because it's not really just a bike. It's like all of these other things, like, little girls and, little boys too, whoever, can just get on a bike and have so much freedom and autonomy and just, feel that like they belong somewhere, that was really important. And I think we accomplished that for sure. And I'm so excited for it to come out. Yeah, it's gonna be amazing. I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm delayed because that's such a perfect like end note to the conversation. But I have more questions. I don't want to be done yet. I do. While you are willing to draw back the curtain on what this takes, I am interested in talking a little bit about the P&L and the extent to which you all go the extra step. You vibe on a book. You have a gut reaction to. I was imagining it, Brenna, by the way. We haven't talked about Seinfeld in a long time, but I was imagining it as one of the team busts through the door, Kramer style, and says, "Have you seen this manuscript?" Pans over to Karen,
amazing.
And she's on a stationary bike, and it's like a perfect moment. But like beyond that, the reality of not just putting your passion into the world or helping somebody else's passion be put into the world, but the reality of fitness, pun not intended, but fitness for market. What do you do to uncover that, and does it ever create problems with creating books that you vibe with otherwise?
Yeah, that's, oh my gosh, that's like a whole nother conversation. I think there's a lot to sort of unpack there. The books that we make are not meant for mass market. If we did that, we would be doing, I don't know, there's publishers that do IP books like Bluey books and Spider-Man. We know that will sell, or, it's, that's not the intention for us. Making the most amount of money, of course, we're a for-profit business. Like that's what we want to do, but not at the cost of our ethics and our mission. And we know that the books that we're making are niche. Like they are considered, whether for better or worse. And some people think being niche is actually a good thing. Like the riches are in the niches. I call it niche. I don't know if it's niches, but and we are specifically serving that demographic. And that's always been from the get-go, like who we are as a company. And for example, all of our authors are mostly underrepresented authors who either are people of color or are immigrants, whatever it might be. And we want those stories to be highlighted, and those stories come from them, So we already know that we're this is not necessarily mainstream. I already know that. That said, it's our job as a publisher to be able to sell and position the book in a way that will get as many buyers excited as possible. And I think just because, for example, you have an Asian character on the cover of a book doesn't mean it's just for Asian audiences, and it's our job to like convince the industry that that's the case. And that's hard because the industry is overwhelmingly like white. And so for us to be able to say, how can you connect with this? And also, how can you sell this into a bookstore that then is going to sell into the hands of readers? Those visions, it's like you're talking to different customers. And so that's been tricky. And that's something that we've been learning sort of this past year with a distributor, that we have to get through all these gatekeepers that I was talking about. And it's really the room of people who are the gatekeepers to the trade and to booksellers and to librarians. The funny thing is, when we talk to readers directly, so if we're doing an event like the LA Times Festival of Books and selling directly to readers and on our website and through social media and at like library events, when we talk to librarians directly, those are our end consumers and end readers too, and their kids that they serve. It's funny because it's totally, we almost never run into this issue of how can we try and make you connect with this book, even though you might not look like the person in the book. Almost never. Like that so rarely is an issue, but it's really the gatekeepers that say like, hey, how can I make this more relatable? Or, we were on a sales call that said, the other front list title that we're coming out with is A Very Asian Guide to Taiwanese Food. And that's the 7th in our Very Asian Guide series. And instantly, I think the suggestion was like, well, let's find like, what are the most populous, Asian cities, cities that have the biggest Asian population. And maybe those should be the targets for, sales reps, and they can go in. And I'm like, yeah, but every parent who has a tween or a teen knows that boba is like the most beloved thing right now. let's use some angle like that. I think there's this new generation, especially with kids, and I hear this all the time from librarians about how open-minded kids are nowadays. They're so into food and exploring culture, and it's almost like the grown-ups in the room haven't like quite caught on yet, or kind of seen how marketable this could be. And so it's trying to connect those dots. And oftentimes you have to just speak a different language to those folks. And those are the challenges that you have as a press that might have more mission driven, like editorial.
Yeah, picture books are such a weird thing anyways, because you're not selling directly to your audience. You have that, even that is gatekept, right? By the parents. Because you have to get through an adult first to get, to maybe the more open-minded kid. But if the parent isn't on board, then it's like, I don't know. And it's interesting too, because I feel like a lot of picture books come out more aimed at the parent than the kid. They're like, these very like lyrical, like sort of highbrow written books, which those are great too. They have a space, they definitely do, but I think a lot of picture books are geared towards like, like the parents are gonna love this, hopefully the kid likes it too, but they're definitely gonna buy it, which it's not a bad way to go. It's just kind of unfortunate that we're not able to write directly to our audience because they don't really have a say over the money.
Yeah. We always say for, you have one customer really, and that's the parent, the person who's paying for the book, right?
Right.
But yeah, you essentially have two customers, because if your kid doesn't like the book, then they're probably not going to come back and buy,
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
Very well considered, though. Yeah.
So go. Sorry.
No, it's just it was a well considered response, and it's a fine line to walk to make sure that you're staying true to your mission while appealing to the widest audience possible.
Right. Yeah, and normally we wouldn't have to do that. So like the whole beauty of sort of going direct to consumers, you can kind of message and position your product directly to whatever that pain point or that thing that this book solves for the reader, for the buyer. And that's the thing that we knew was going to be a challenge going into traditional sort of distribution and publishing. So, we're navigating that. And it's...
Congratulations, though, on how far you have come in a super short time since just 2021.
Yeah, that's like, it's so fast. And we are up and like over the hour, so I just want to be mindful of your time. But I just wanted to say thanks again, for coming on and chatting with us. You were so candid. Yeah, it's really nice to talk to a publisher and somebody on the inside, you know, with more of this behind the scenes knowledge to sort of enlighten us, you know, like what's happening back there, you know, like what's going on.
I know.
So yeah, so thank you.
There's so much to talk about. I mean, even like you guys had really great questions and all of those things. You could do full on episodes on each of those topics on their own. But I think it was really fun to be able to actually use your book as an example for a lot of the stuff that we were talking about.
For sure.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't wait. The book looks amazing. I'm so excited for it to come out. So I can't wait.
I'm like really pumped about this, and Clay and I are super excited about the marketing behind it, and it's just so well written, and the way it's positioned and phrased, it's not it's fascinating and like lyrical and all the wonderful things, and empowering and inclusive. And the book looks beautiful. Michelle Pereira,
it does.
So talking about giving shout out, she did an incredible job.